Well, overall, the story of the joint calls between EU and Brazil are definitely a success story. A success story in many regards. First, we use the first calls as a way of explore potential opportunities for working together. And that was the reason why we have touched a very broad range of topics, ranging from nanoelectronics, microelectronics, applications of societal impact. Later, we start focusing more specifically our activities in those areas that had greater potential for greater impact. And that was the reason why we have evolved towards more specific topics like the next generation of 5G communications, the discussions around cloud computing, which is the next big thing in terms of a new paradigm for computing, and also, referring to the very last call, Internet of Things. These are all part of a common ecosystem which is leveraging opportunities for collaboration in a much wider range of topics. So we see this as really a way of moving from the general into more specific topics with greater and more important opportunities to get a wider community of stakeholders, both from EU and Brazil, engage into this kind of fruitful cooperation. We have had over these 4 calls, because as you just said, we are now finishing the evaluation of the 4th call. We have always oriented our discussions about the areas of potential interest in the perspective of seeking mutual benefits, both for the EU but also for the Brazil ecosystem. And indeed, we think that we have achieved quite something in this regard. Let me start, for instance, what is the important impact for the EU from this point of view. Brazil is a brand new world. We are talking about elements of scale, elements of geographic diversity, elements of application that are well beyond what can be found in Europe. And in addition to this, Brazil, with 200 million people, is basically half the size of the European Union. So it's almost like having a boost of 50% in our activities, not to mention the geopolitical influence of Brazil as a leading country in the South America space. So for Europe, this is really an unmatched opportunity to really gain scale in many of the EU initiatives around the digital world. I believe that actually Brazil also found very interesting elements of and benefits from this kind of partnership. Let me just give an example that came from a brief conversation that I had with State Secretary Maximiliano only some time ago. He highlighted that in many respects the more structured approach to the issues of digital agenda, innovation markets has been really a very important source of learning and source of inspiration in shaping the Brazilian agenda for the digital society. And we believe this is really a very good example of how two partners can extract benefits that make their own experience and their own expertise more deeper and expanded in order to make this really successful venture. I have to say that I was privileged by having the chance of attending, just before the signature of this Memorandum of Understanding, a meeting between the Brazilian Minister for Science, Technology, Innovation and Communications, Mr. Gilberto Kassab, and Vice President Ansip, a meeting during which they had the chance of discussing the prospects of further cooperation. And one of the things that actually emerged very clearly from this conversation was the fact that to address the challenges of the digital transformation, it's not enough to have just governments talking to each other. It's also important to have the stakeholders, the people in the field that are really doing work that has direct impact in people's life, acting together, exploring opportunities for economies of scale, for critical mass achievements, joining forces, working together, identifying joint projects, and in this way really make things change. Is very much the process of moving from the lab into the real world, moving from a small scale of people into getting the common citizen dealing with these novelties and how these novelties can really improve their quality of life, their well-being, and ultimately create economic impact, create jobs, and also prepare people for the jobs of the future.